A while back, Martin over at Wintergarten showed us his idea of this new kind of instrument he came up with. He called it the Ondophone, and he asked around if anybody wanted to help him build it. So I put up my hand, and I actually ended up getting the job. After looking at the drawings and the first CAD drafts, I got a pretty good idea of the general principles, and I decided to start building a first prototype. I am not a musician, and I wanted to get a better understanding of how the instrument might be played, what the different functions were, how well these would work, and more importantly, how they would interact and interfere with each other. If you haven't seen Martin's video about the Ondophone, I'll leave a link to his video here somewhere. But here's a quick summary. It's a string instrument, basically the neck part of an electric guitar with just 2 strings. A slider moves up and down the neck to choose the note that's being played, and the neck can also be pushed down to activate a spring-mounted hammer that can create a sustained tremolo action. In order to mark the exact position of each note along the neck, there should also be some sort of index along the way that you can feel when you move over the correct position. However, it was also important that the slider did not snap into position, but moved smoothly between notes. I started off with the absolute minimum: a wood bar, a bunch of guitar strings, a handful of tuners from the spare parts bin of my local music shop, and a super cheap electric pickup I found on eBay. Since I've never held a guitar in my life, I was quite excited about the very first squeaks I got out of it. I had an amp and a speaker laying around from an older project, and I even plugged together a simple preamp on a breadboard so I could record tests with my computer. A strip of brass formed the spring part of the hammer, and I tried different materials to strike the strings. Pure brass, wood, steel, each produced a uniquely different quality of tone. I ended up using a steel shoe, as it produced a very clean sound and provided the right amount of weight and bounciness. Next up, the slider. It's riding on a pair of miniature linear bearings that I bought for another project. But luckily, they were just the perfect size for this. I machined a base out of thick acrylic that was screwed directly to the bearing blocks and was holding the 2 stainless steel risers. The handpiece is a block of Delrin that's riding up and down on these risers. It is held in a neutral position by springs on both sides. The strip of brass on the Delrin block makes contact with the strings when the block is pressed down to choose the note to play. A piece made out of foam and fleece is constantly riding along the strings just behind the slider. It is there to dampen away all vibrations of the strings on the other side of the slider. The whole neck assembly then got mounted on another wood bar via a bolt that was creating a sort of hinging pivot. And a few bits and bobs here and there, keeping everything properly aligned and in place. A whole bunch of magnets in precisely the right spot underneath the neck serve as indicators for the location of the notes, just like the frets on a guitar. This was all working surprisingly well. You could play a single note by pushing down the slider, and pressing down further would move the entire neck down, which in turn triggered the hammer. Yeah, did I mention I'm not a musician? And then, everything got more complicated. Martin had the idea that it would be awesome to not only have one set of strings, but to be able to select from another set of strings that were tuned differently. In order to make this work, we needed a whole new control axis. Remember, back and forth selects the note, up and down plays the note and/or hammer, and now a sideways motion would select between the 2 pairs of strings. So not only did the slider have to move between the 2 pairs of strings, but so did the hammer. In order to achieve this, the entire assembly had to move up onto an intermediate block that could form a second pivot hinge in relation to the immovable base hinging sideways. And 2 more strings were added. The spring holding up the neck had to move to the other side, and 2 stop mechanisms were added that would hold or return the neck to a neutral position, both horizontal and side to side. The slider got another little slider added on top of it. I also decided to actuate the hammer itself. When the neck is rotated, the hammer rotates as well. This serves 2 purposes. It reduces how far the neck has to be rotated, and it inverts the location where the hammer hits the strings. Now, when you hold the slider and move it to one side, it moves over to select one pair of strings. At the same time, the entire neck rotates as well, and actuates the hammer, which moves over to the same set of strings. Now at this point, the Ondophone started to become quite a challenging mechanism. You had to move the slider back and forth, feeling for the magnetic frets, tap it down halfway, or all the way, and move it side to side to select the desired pair of strings. For someone like me, who can barely coordinate to unlock a door while holding 2 shopping bags, it was getting a bit too complicated. Did I mention I'm not a musician? Anyway, a lot of the checkboxes regarding functionality had been ticked, and it was time to put it in the hands of the person who actually wanted to play it. Any more feedback would have to come from Martin physically interacting with it. So I put it in a box and shipped it to France. And the rest, as they say, is history. As it turned out, the concept didn't quite live up to Martin's expectations in the end. But it was good fun to work on the Ondophone. And I couldn't believe it when I saw a video of Martin playing an amazing song on it. But then again, you can give him a handsaw and he will play a masterpiece on that. Alright, that's all I've got for now. If you haven't already, check out Martin's Ondophone video, link in the description. And also a shout out to Carlos and Chris, who provided expertise and inspiration to the project. Yeah. Now I've been working on a new project for quite some time now that unfortunately I'm not supposed to talk about yet. It involves this new toy. But as soon as I can, I will make a bunch of videos about it. It's going to be epic. Until then, bye. Just kidding.